Hi, this is Denise.
Hey, this is Maggie.
Welcome to our podcast, Candor and Courage at Work.
Denise and I have known each other for a long time, a couple of decades, HR pros, and we thought it might be helpful if we got together and shared some of the things that we've learned along the way.
That's right, Maggie. Many struggle with being candid and being courageous, and we just want to use what we've learned to help you use those traits in your daily work life.
Here's hoping that makes you more successful. And here we go.
So last month we had Elena Scorpin. She was our winner for Meet with Maggie and Denise and go over goals for 2026. And really enjoyed having her as a guest.
I know it was great.
She's not a podcaster or anything, so she did an excellent job.
I thought so.
Yeah. So we're going to look forward to seeing how she's progressing over the course of the year. We'll connect with her offline and see how she's doing, and we'll report back to the audience on how she's doing on her goals of better balance and investing more deeply in relationships.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice blend of her being courageous. She shared a couple of stories about how she had been courageous and stepped out of her comfort zone in some of the things that she had already done, and putting that in the context as well of having a good, candid conversation with herself about what she really wanted.
Yep. She's using my mantra this year of seeing things as they are. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in this episode.
Awesome.
Our episode today is dealing with underperformers, people that are not performing up to expectations.
Well, that's a question that we've had from folks since inception. Since Candor and Courage at Work began, we've had folks say, yeah, but how do I address underperformers? So I'm looking forward to getting into the meat of this with you today and hopefully providing some perspective that's helpful for our listeners.
I agree. I mean, I know this is something I struggled with throughout my leadership, career, and I would have really appreciated a podcast with Maggie and Denise to help me out. But we both had Stephen Covey.
That's right.
To lean on in the early years, but
right.
Yeah. Maybe having a quick 20-minute podcast would have been helpful to accelerate the learning or the application.
And that's why we do what we do.
That's correct. So for those of you out there, whether you're a young leader, a new leader, or you have more experience in it, I think everybody can relate to dealing with people that underperform. And as Maggie and I were talking about this episode, I said, if any of you have never dealt with an underperformer and don't see an underperformer in your future, then you are our leadership unicorn.
Yes.
And we would like to invite you to write books and do podcasts so we can learn from you on
please contact us to be our next guest.
Yes. How can we never have another underperformer? But we know that's probably not the case. And so that's why today we wanted to deal with this topic. And I guess for me, again, with Stephen Covey as well as Simon Sinek, I want to begin with the end in mind. Start with the why we need to address underperformers. And I know for me, I get very frustrated by mediocrity. I'm looking for people that want to excel. And so if I'm sitting there amongst peers and I see that I'm trying my hardest and best to excel and the people around me aren't, gosh, is that so demotivating?
It is. It's demoralizing, and it is the quintessential example of one rotten apple spoils the bunch. Because that level of complacency, and I've had folks talk with me about that in their work environments, where they see a level of complacency or a level of acceptable performance that maybe doesn't rise to their standards, their own personal standards. And at some point in time, something happens internally where the person just says, I don't know why I should try so hard because they're not.
Right? The bar of performance or output production is lowered.
Yep.
And if you have, if you as an individual have that deep drive or motivation to do your best every day, you will continue to do your best. But it is less motivating to do your best when those around you are not leveling up the way you are.
Definitely becomes far less satisfying.
And I would say this too. When I look at performance of my team, I'm often reminded of my own personal brand.
Right.
And how that projects outward and the confidence people will have in me and my department by having a highly competent and productive team.
Who is trusted. And a lot of trust comes from consistency.
Correct.
So having a high level of expectations is an excellent example of how a leader shows up with consistency, both outwardly looking towards the rest of the organization and within their own team.
Right. And when to our audience are our customers of, my department has customers or clients. If that consistency isn't there, then they start to question what's going on with that department.
Right.
And because they're not performing like they do. So collectively, the weakest link is going to reflect upon the whole department or team.
Yep. So that really gets at, starting with that why, beginning with the end in mind, and hitting on the personal brand is really where we start. Because sometimes when we think about underperformers, we're really thinking about the individual that's not meeting our expectations or not hitting the marks, whatever that may be, not behaving in the way we expect them to, that is acting as that weakest link. And it takes a lot of courage to step back and realize that maybe at the end of the day, it's not you, it's me.
Right. And I know for me first, I'm thinking, and again, I'll be candid with you. I'll be candid with you. I look outward like, why are they not doing this? It's so easy to look at the person and say, why are they not living up to expectations? When really and truly, as the leader of our respective groups, right? No matter what happens, it's our responsibility. It's our fault, if you will.
The buck stops here.
Correct. So really, I think it is incumbent upon all of us as leaders to look in the mirror, take a long, hard look in the mirror at ourselves. And again, Denise's 2026 mantra, see things as they are, not as you believe them to be. If that makes sense. You really want to be honest and candid with yourself about why things are the way they are.
Yeah, and I think that does take some intentional analysis of what's this atmosphere like? Let's start there. So just start with that bigger picture. You've spoken about the weakest link and how a well-oiled machine, a team that's performing well, is a great reflection on the leader. So let's start with the leader. Am I modeling the behavior that I want to see? Am I really setting those high standards? And I think that's the great starting point for taking that hard look in the mirror and seeing things as they really are, is really analyzing, is that what I am doing day in and day out consistently?
Yeah, I love the thought of the atmosphere or the vibe of the team.
Yeah.
Because they are watching. It's not just the underperformer, it's everybody else looking. And if I personally believe they're not blaming the person who's not doing the job, they're blaming the leader who's not addressing it.
That gets at that whole cascade of things that came to mind as you said that. And it reminded me of a story, which we may or may not have time for today, about the reality of that. Because people really pay far more attention to what you do as a leader than what you say as a leader. And so they're going to notice whether you're monitoring performance regularly.
And are you plugged in?
Yeah.
Are you aware of where things are working well and where they're not?
Right. Or where they might start going awry. Or even if they're going well, are you a good leader in making sure that you're recognizing that? It's not, as much as we're talking about underperformers today, we're really talking about the lens as a leader through which you look at what's going well, what's not going well.
And when you recognize people for good performance, you are displaying to everybody that you value high performance, you value excellence. And then if I'm a person that knows that, I'm going to want to drive to do more to raise the bar. For myself as well as the department.
Sure. Yeah. There's nothing more fun than having a group of folks all moving in the same direction and getting things to happen. And albeit probably boring or even mystical, perhaps, or mystifying is maybe the better word to folks outside of HR, there's so many pieces that when they're working together well, you are making progress in creating a better work culture and better business outcomes.
So along with recognizing performance, it also gets back to timely recognition of when things aren't working well.
Oh, yes.
Is there an obstacle that is out of anybody's control, or looking at the individual, is that person, or am I addressing their underperformance very timely? I always go back to my good friend Barney Fife when he tells Ange, you got to nip it in the bud, Ange.
Yes.
You know, you gotta be willing, you gotta be courageous, you have to be candid about, hey, we need to address this while the problem is small before it mushrooms into a much larger problem that's going to take a lot of my time to correct. And I always, again, liken it to driving down the road. How can I help them as their driver's ed teacher sitting in the passenger seat? They're going to drift off. And my job is to get them back on the road safely before they go down in the ditch and take me and them out.
Yes. Well, and that is professionally the risk that we take when we don't address things on a timely basis.
Yeah.
So, yes, recognition needs to be timely.
And public, if you can.
If you can, and if the person prefers that.
Correct.
Sometimes they like a note instead, but the recognition for a job well done needs to be timely, as does, to your point, if you're drifting off the shoulder, you're going to run the risk of going into the ditch.
A lot more time and money is spent on getting that car back on the road than it is just to course correct with that person as quickly as you can.
So when I think about atmosphere, the last thing that really comes to mind for me on that is, as the leader is assessing the team dynamics, is fear preventing the individual themselves from speaking up about, I'm really struggling with this, or anything else? And so that really leads into that whole exercise of, why is the underperformance occurring?
Yes. And to your point about fear, again, go back to our prior episodes of, have you built relationships where people feel comfortable coming to you when they are struggling?
Yeah.
Because again, the immediate thought I have is why are they not performing? But am I making an environment or an atmosphere conducive to them coming forward and being candid, having the courage to come forward and say, I'm underperforming and I need help.
Right. So. And here's how I can see you being able to help me.
So we've gone over the atmosphere, and hopefully we're candid with ourselves and outlined where things are working well and where they're not in the atmosphere. And now we're looking at the person.
Right.
Right. And I guess the very first thing, because I'm responsible as the leader for them being in this role, is, did I put the right person in the right role here? Did I make the right choice by having this person in this role? Now that's hiring them, promoting them. Sometimes we over promote and put the best worker in this role, but really it calls for a different skill set. And, but bottom line, do I have the right person in the right role?
It's a great place to start. And again, utilizing your mantra, seeing things as they really are.
Correct.
Having clarity on what the right person in that role needs to possess in terms of skills and competencies and behaviors and choices and so forth. So, yeah.
And remembering your why, recognizing the high stakes of doing nothing means that those problems with lowering the bar and running off into the ditch is going to accelerate if I don't do something.
Yep.
So okay, so now we're looking at the person. And what is for you, Maggie, what's kind of the first thing that comes to your mind on when you look at an individual and why they may be underperforming?
I always start with me, and that is, have I made the expectations clear? Are they explicit? Are they achievable? Do I believe that the person understands them? So it's a little bit of me and them in that question, right? Because really what I'm analyzing is, how effectively did we communicate?
Yes.
Around all of those aspects.
And communication is two ways. So did
It's
you
both.
as the leader communicate clearly?
Right.
Did the underperformer clearly listen, engage, and make sure they understand? Did you as the leader and the underperformer, are you calibrated for what's the scope of the job, what's expected, the duties?
Right. What does success look like? And so once I've analyzed that, then, that may be an area where I need to take a deeper dive with that person. And I move on to look at, if I believe that I was clear and they understood the directions, in other words, we had good communication, do I believe that they've been adequately trained? Do they really understand what all is involved? Do they have the capabilities to do that? Is there more training that would be beneficial to them? What can I do to help them be successful?
Yeah, I love that because it's, I would say 9 out of 10 times we all make hiring mistakes. Again, it's a two-way situation, but you've vetted out their skills. So chances are they have the minimum training necessary or the minimum skills necessary. But to your point, what additional training could benefit them if they did have the right level of training to begin with? But if they didn't, then it goes back to us. Did we make the right decision to put them in the role? And
was I in a hurry?
That's a whole other episode.
Yeah, it is. And then, of course, you get at, the individual and looking at where they're motivated. And there's like layers to that. Is there something going on in their personal life that maybe they've hinted at or shared, and I'm not looking to need to get explicit, but it's an awareness.
Correct.
When we ask people to bring their whole person, their whole self to work, that includes what's going on in their personal life. And sometimes that can be the obstacle that is preventing them from being as effective as they'd like to be.
Yeah, especially if they have a history of excellent performance or very good performance. And now all of a sudden there's been this shift to underperforming. That does almost speak to something outside the organization that they're dealing with, but it is leaching into the workplace because we're human. We can't just shut things off when we hit the door.
Flipping a switch. It is not. As much as, as a professional, I endeavor to compartmentalize. It is very challenging. And I know when things are weighing on me personally, it impacts my work. Yeah. No question.
I think, and again, this can be, I relate to this a lot too, is what's on my plate? Is it reasonable what I have on my plate to be able to get everything done? And am I using my resources effectively by delegating?
Oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah. I've been resistant in the past to delegating, not so much anymore.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is just for me, and I can say exactly the same thing, Denise, is I always want control.
Yes.
Right? And I don't always have control. And I need to, and went through a lot of additional training as a professional on how to delegate effectively.
Well, I've heard the advice, but, sometimes was reluctant to implement the changes needed. But no, it is really important. And, I've talked in prior episodes about this, but you just have to give up and say, I'm hurting my brand by taking on too much. So, that's requiring the underperformer to look and be real with themselves. Am I seeing things the way they are, and embracing the art of delegation and actually doing that.
Sure.
But sometimes, and of course with some of the economic times that some companies have gone through, and they've said, okay, we're going to reduce this role over here and shift their responsibilities over to you. At the end of the day, if those additional responsibilities are causing a person to drown, in their work responsibilities, performance is going to be impacted negatively. And we as leaders have to recognize, okay, what do we value? Do we, you and I've talked about this being a potential obstacle that we can help them with. How do we re-engineer, get rid of some things that maybe aren't as valuable anymore to alleviate that person from having to do all this, struggle with stress to get it all done, even if stress isn't coming from their personal life.
Right.
But help them get relief there and focus on the things that are the most valuable.
Yep. Yeah. And I think those are all factors that really enable us to assess, clear-eyed assessment. What's going on with this underperformer? How have I contributed to it? What do I need to do to enable them to be successful? Can I make them successful? Is that opportunity there? And then, ultimately at the end of the day, the answer might be no.
Right. But going back to what you just shared with us, we owe it to the people that we've placed into these roles to do a full 360, a full candid assessment of where the problems lie, be it ourselves as leaders or the person as the underperformer, and look in the mirror, return to that mirror and say, have I, as their leader, done everything possible to make this person successful? Have I done everything? Anything left undone? Because if the end result is you've got to separate employment with them, that's the last resort.
It is. And I think for many leaders, especially those that may be inexperienced, addressing underperformance feels like you're punishing someone. And then termination is like the ultimate punishment, right? In the instance of addressing underperformer, if we can think about that in terms of corrective action, so yes, maybe it's too much on the plate because of downsizing that occurred and there's just so much volume they can't handle it. Or perhaps it is that additional training. Or perhaps they are going to be better off. And I've seen this innumerable times where someone in role A really wasn't able to do that job for some reason, but in role B was a stellar performer.
Right.
So look at what's another seat on the bus. Jim Collins, good to great. And if you don't find another seat on the bus and you ultimately do separate from the employment relationship, I just encourage folks to remember somewhere along the line that represents a failure. It's certainly not a punishment for the person.
Correct. And again, it's our fault. But I would offer this too, as we are kind of coming to a close on this episode, is that don't forget the rest of your team is watching.
Oh, yes.
Okay, they are watching. And if the underperformer is really not a good fit skill-wise, they're going to be happy, maybe not happy that they got separated, but happy to have the relief that somebody is ineffective in that role, never really could be effective because it was a skill gap that needed, that would never be addressed, and that you've done something as the leader. But think about the people who are underperforming because of personal issues or just being overwhelmed and not being courageous enough to come to you and say, I need help.
Right.
They know what's going on with that person. And if you as the leader say, well, you're not doing the job, we're cutting ties, the rest of them are saying, holy cow.
Right.
I better not be candid. I better not be courageous and go in there and say I need help because they're going to separate with me. I'm just going to go find another job.
Yeah.
And the ones that are your highest talent are going to hit the door first. So
and they'll be able to land because they've got the goods.
That's correct. So I always look at everybody's watching, and I'll share this too. Don't forget your boss is watching.
Oh yeah, that.
And your brand and all those things. But yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's your whole, it's you and what you give to the organization. It's your personal brand, your department's brand, and you really just need to consider all of that before you just, rip the Band-Aid off and let somebody go.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think with that, we're going to wrap up here today. I've got one parting thought, but I know we, in talking about addressing underperformers, both thought of experiences that we had. And so when we come back for part 2 of addressing underperformers, I want to start with sharing those stories to provide some context around different ways that these kinds of things that we've talked about today can play out. So the bottom line is addressing underperformers isn't fun. It's certainly not easy, but it's absolutely a prescription for leadership failure if it's not done.
Agree. All right. Well, that's our episode today. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Denise. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for Candor and Courage at Work.
We hope you found some inspiration and encouragement in today's episode.
For more information or to connect with us, visit our website, candorandcourageatwork.com, and be sure to download future episodes wherever you listen.